Paula Pant, the host of the Afford Anything podcast, likes to answer questions her listeners send in. This is a special episode where she also has Joe Saul-Sehy from the Stacking Benjamins show join in the fun.
Hello. So this is Brionna James. I love your podcast, by the way. So I have a question about investing. Can you do like a podcast/YouTube video on investing into a side business? Because I see different things like, Shark Tank, and I see people like having all their ideas presenting to those investors. And I'm wondering, would that be something worthwhile? Because, businesses can go up and down. It can be like, a money hole where you lose all your money, or it can be very successful and you're doing very well. So can you do a video weighing out the pros and cons and like give your advice and expertise, and maybe have, other people comment on about it, and like, bring in a guest speaker about it? Because I'm a young professional. I'm actually 22 and I'm working in, corporate world, and I love it so far. But I also I like to keep in mind side hustles. And so, cause I watch some of your videos, like, becoming a millionaire on a teacher's salary. And so that definitely sparked interest and got me thinking like, hey, I think I want to retire at 35 or 45. So what are some things that I can get there to be financially free, financially independent, and everything else that you talk about on your podcast? So I would love for you to do a podcast on, investing into a side business, side hustle, and the pros and cons of that. Thank you for everything, and continue your great work on Afford Everything. Have a great day.
Sounds like another episode idea.
Joe, so this is a great question because you and I both have personally had to deal with exactly this question. How much money do we invest in our side businesses? So, Joe, let me ask you, how did you make the decision?
Well, I think that rather than what I did, because I think I messed a lot of this up when I started with my business initially, I've learned a lot since then. And with, business number 3, business number 4, like I get better at it every time. So I think we should define the battlefield, which is that most businesses fail because they don't have enough capital at the beginning of the business. They also don't realize that the runway to profitability usually is about doubly as long as the original business planner thinks it's going to be. So if you think it's going to take you 6 months, probably going to take a year. Think it's going to take a year, probably going to take 2 years. So because there's lots of bumps in the road, because unless you're already an expert in that field completely, you don't know what's coming. So a bunch of capital is important. And the second thing is the runway. Now, there also is another problem, which is a lot of people create businesses not thinking, Paula, about selling the business. And I think if you start off from the beginning of how do I get out, even if you have no plan ever to get out, right? I think then you're much more likely to build a business that has structure and has systems. And that's what ends up winning in the business ultimately. Listen, if you're going to start with a business, I think I would have not the complete, boring old 500-page business plan they tell you to do, but I would answer those things. How am I going to make money? How much is it going to cost to operate? Double those numbers. What's my sell condition, and what are the systems I'm going to use inside my business? And at that point, then decide to go. I would still, though, Paula, I would tell Brionna, still have your plan B. Keep putting money away toward retirement. Keep an emergency fund. You see these people that sink their entire life into their business, and when it doesn't go the way they expected because they missed something or because all of a sudden the economy changed, they end up in a real world of hurt. You don't want that to happen.
Okay, but so what I hear you say within that answer is have sufficient capital, have a long runway, and have an exit plan. Her question was, how do you know how much is sufficient capital? And let's walk through an example just to make it a little bit more concrete. Let's say that you decide that you want to start selling car windshield repair kits on Amazon. So your plan is to buy a significant amount of all of the components of a car windshield repair kit, wholesale, assemble these kits, and then brand them, put a logo on them, and start selling them on Amazon. In order to do this, you need upfront capital of X thousands of dollars in order to buy all of those individual components wholesale from, let's say, a site like Alibaba. How do you know if that's a good idea or not? If you need to spend $5,000 doing this, how do you have proof of concept that this is a good way to spend $5,000?
Are you asking me that question?
Yeah, I know how I would answer it, but I want to hear how you would answer it first.
Yeah, testing.
Okay. And how would you do that?
I would test with a smaller amount and see how quickly they go. Full well knowing that hopefully if things go right, you're not going to be able to fulfill demand. So I would test the demand at a low level, see how that works, and then I would scale up from there.
That's exactly what I would do. That's precisely what I would do. So what I would do in that example is I would sell, even if I had to sell them at cost, even if I couldn't get the big wholesale discounts and I just assembled a few of those windshield repair kits and sold them completely at cost, or even sold them at a minor loss. Like, if you sell 20 kits at a loss of $1 a kit, you're out $20. So, that's what I would do. I would assemble those kits. I would sell them on Amazon. I would see if I could sell the first 20. And if I could sell them and if there was high demand for them, then I would know that there's demand in the market for this. And then I would proceed forward.
Yeah, and I would start off at the price point that you want first before you took the loss, so you can determine the price point first as well.
Oh, yeah. I would keep it at the price point that I would be offering it, but I'm just saying if you couldn't get the bulk deals, if you couldn't get the wholesale deals.
Because you're only ordering 5 instead of 100.
Exactly. Gotcha. So you don't have economies of scale on your side yet, which means that it might not be profitable yet, but that's fine. If you can just get proof of concept, even if that's at cost or even if that's at a minor loss, that proof of concept will be worth it in order to validate the idea.
In today's speedy economy, what used to happen is that people would get all kinds of data, make sure they have everything ready. There's this great concept now that you need to be familiar with, Brionna, which is called minimum viable product. And that is get your product to the very, very, what Paul and I are discussing is getting the product to the very, very minimum, just ready to go so you can be faster, right? It's all about speed today because the second that you're on Amazon, if you studied Amazon, somebody's going to come out and mimic you the second that you're there. So you need to be quick. So minimum viable product is something I would look into even more.
Well, yeah. And I think another part of the concept of creating minimum viable product is that before you invest a lot of resources in making something perfect and better and awesome, like before you optimize it, just create it, sell it, and see what the demand is, and also see what your customer response is, because oftentimes the way that you want to improve something or the way that you want to optimize something is not necessarily what your customer wants. I'm seeing this with the beta testers in my course. As I release lessons to them, there are aspects of the lesson that I don't like, that I'm unhappy with and that I would want to change. But when I release the lesson to them, the feedback that I get, the questions, the suggestions, are about things that are completely different. So that, in other words, the stuff of the lesson that I dislike is stuff that doesn't bother them at all. And the stuff that they want to see changed is stuff that I didn't even notice. And that's why having that beta group is so helpful. Brionna, also to answer your question, because I think the kernel of your question is, how do I decide how much money to put into a side hustle? And there are sort of two approaches to answering that. There is the viability of the side hustle itself, and then there's also your individual capacity to put that money in. And so I think we've answered this question in terms of addressing the viability of the business idea itself. But in terms of your individual capacity, it boils down to personal finance basics. Don't go into debt in order to fund this business. Spend less than you earn and fund it from the gap between your spending and your income.
Yeah.
Really, I think that's the key, more than anything, because if you do that, then if the business doesn't work out, worst case scenario is that you lived more frugally than you otherwise would have needed to, but you're still not going to be in the hole. You're still not going to be in any debt. And I think that's important.
Yeah, that's a great lesson without a hangover.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's fine. You know what? If you lose money on a business, that's totally cool. That's tuition. That is the cost of learning. Because at the end of the day, in terms of a person's lifetime, you don't need to win every single game. You just need to win more than you lose, or you need to win bigger than you lose. But it's okay to have a series of losses and failures, because that's just part of the process.
Hey, did you enjoy this excerpt from the Afford Anything podcast? Then be sure to subscribe to Paula's YouTube channel. Not only is every podcast episode and Ask Paula question released here on YouTube, other creative deep thought videos are created just for you. Remember, you can watch anything, just not everything. Fill your YouTube viewing time with more videos to make you think and grow so you can afford anything. Go ahead, hit that little red subscribe button. We'll take care of the rest.